The field is set, the player pool is up, and we are ready to break down the final major of the 2023 calendar year. It is the Open Championship at Royal Liverpool. We're here to break things down from a PGA DFS perspective, let you know our top golfers in each FanDuel salary tier, and much more to get you ready for Thursday's Tee Times. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, joined here as always by Brandon Gdula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, the Open Championship comes up this week. It is going to be a delight with so many fun guys, realistically in contention, and a fun duo at the top. How you doing today?
I'm good. I love the Open. Love watching some different styles of golf, seeing the creativity required. I guess I'm probably not. I mean, I know I'm not alone in like finding a lot of really scoreable courses like boring, but I think a lot of people also like that. So I don't really know what the prevailing opinion is, but I think everybody loves the Open. But I would be doing a lot better, frankly, if you would stop beating me in our head-to-head contest so that I can just close out the season. Now you're making me sweat, and I don't really care for it. So if you could knock that off, that would help me a good bit this week.
I can guarantee you it doesn't matter because I would need to win out in order to clinch it alone. So I'm just kind of doing this to prolong your suffering. I don't actually care about winning myself anymore because I know that I can't. I am doing it solely to make sure you have to sweat longer. It's vindictive. It is not self-motivated. It is all in order to maximize a pain for you. Did get a win last week, which was very nice, but I kind of have to find ways to make sure my lineup is different than yours, which means not using the optimal plays in every situation. So ready for it to be done, to be frankly honest. Honestly, though, with the bobbleheads back here, now that I've moved, some of these are via our bobble hat things. I'm trying to point correctly on the screen. This is DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
I remember that one.
Dante Culpepper is right here. I know that was one as well. Bubba Wallace over here. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I can't remember which hand it is because it's backwards on the screen. So I'm trying to point without looking back.
Yeah, it says the guy who makes fun of me for doing the wrong way for
trending up and trending down. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's just it's just hypocritical. I think it's honestly disgusting, and I think you should be embarrassed.
I'm not. You always think I should be embarrassed, and yet it's never worked. So I feel like at some point you should give up. And maybe I will finally break you down throughout the show for today by constantly asking you Rory or Scottie, Rory or Scottie, Rory or Scottie, because frankly, it's not an easy question to answer. Rory McIlroy coming off a win at the Genesis Scottish Open. Scottie Scheffler has not finished outside the top 5 since the 90s, I believe. So it's a tough discussion.
He was in his 40s in the 90s.
What?
He was in his early 40s in the 1990s.
Yes. Scottie Scheffler was born in the 1990s, but he was also in his 40s at the exact same time because he's Scottie Scheffler. We're going to talk about Scheffler versus McIlroy. We're talking about where Jon Rahm fits in that equation, talking about our top guys in each salary tier and much more to get you ready for the Open Championship here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. Still the solo shot going up every weekday, breaking down MLB DFS. We have a UFC via Austin Swain for select events as well. And of course, the solo shot also does go up over on FanDuel TV Plus. If you're watching us over there right now, we appreciate you as always. You can find Covering the Spread on FanDuel TV Plus as well. If you want to watch Covering the Spread, Solo Shot, Up and Adams, Run It Back, whatever it may be on FanDuel TV Plus. Check it out on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku as well. And of course, this show is up on the FanDuel YouTube page as well. Are you looking to have a stake in the Open Championship all weekend? Well, FanDuel has you covered with the PGA Eagle, which is now live. Test your knowledge of the PGA Tour by putting together a 6-person lineup while staying under the salary cap using FanDuel's live scoring feature. Follow along as you compete for a share of $350,000 with first place taking home $100K, all for just a $9 entry fee. Whether it's household names like Rory McIlroy and Victor Hovland, or lesser-known golfers such as Taylor Moore and Ben Griffin, they're going to tee off on Thursday or late Wednesday. Either way, plenty of options for you to fill out a lineup as you compete for first place. Thursday will be here before you know it, so submit your lineups on FanDuel today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Let's dig in now to the Open Championship at Royal Liverpool. It is at Hoylake. It is 7,313 yards and a par 71. This course last hosted a major back in 2014. Of course, Rory McIlroy was the winner then. Also hosted back in 2006. But it's undergone pretty major renovations since that time. It was a par 72 back then. They made some major tweaks for sure across the board. There are 156 golfers in the field. The top 70 plus ties will make the cut after the first two rounds. So again, top 70, not top 65 for this week because it is the Open Championship. So not a lot of data as far as course history for this event. But we do have some, you can look back to 2014 and kind of look into the renovations they've made. So Brandon, when you dig into Royal Liverpool, what stands out to you as far as things we should emphasize for this week?
Yeah, it's tough. Anytime we don't get shot link data, we can really only rely on stats that are not necessarily utilized heavily currently for a reason. I mean, some people like to look at the traditional stats still. But strokes gained, while not perfect, a much better measure of how guys are playing and why they're finishing a certain way. So it's a lot of the guesswork for this week that we got to factor in, then account for the changes. But realistically, I'm not going to overdo it with the changes because it's a major, and that does also kind of just mean that we can simplify things a little bit and look at overall form and overall stats. But of note, the winning scores the past two iterations at Royal Liverpool were 18 and 17 under by Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy respectively, but it's a little tiny bit misleading because there was separation for them. I think it's maybe more noteworthy that 7 golfers in 2006 were 10 under or better, and 11 did that in 2014. So still going to play relatively tough relative to par. Also, obviously, par is different this time around, but winning score is not going to be crazy, most likely, unless we get into the weather, which we'll talk about. But basically what I've seen so far early in the week is that it's going to play longer, maybe a little bit wetter, less rollout. That could put an emphasis on driving distance, which is the right way to play it off the tee. If you're looking to give value to a certain driving stat, it should be driving distance, even though it did not do much to explain scoring in either 2006 or 2014. But distance off the tee, better than accuracy for sure for this week. You can look at strokes gained off the tee, but realistically, what I saw when I dug in to try to figure out what led to scoring, what explained scoring differentials in 2006 and 2014 was more of the irons, wedges, and putter. Some of that's a little bit like, I don't know, self-evident. If putting better is going to correlate pretty strongly to scoring better. But again, it's kind of what we can do. And that's really all we can do in a lot of cases. But yeah, greens and regulation, pretty mild correlation, so that implies that irons are going to matter, which we tend to know for every single week. We tend to know that for the Open. So basically what I think we need to take away from all of this is that you don't have to be the world's best driver, but it helps if you're long off the tee. You want to have good irons, and you want to be able to putt well for this week. So as far as like the key stats go, I'm going a little bit on distance, strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting, strokes gained around the green, and really overall form, total strokes gained average, because it's a major. It's going to weed out pretty much all of the weaker golfers, aside from those having true outlier weeks at the top of the leaderboard. So I don't think we need to get too cute. Look for ball strikers who can putt, basically.
And I think that there are two ways you could look at this, where you look at it as emphasize distance, or you could look at it as de-emphasize off the tee play in general and try to find guys who are good fairway through green. So I want to ask you, let's talk about guys like Russell Henley, Denny McCarthy, guys who I would consider in the 9,000 range or the high 8,000 range, but who are going to lose some distance off the tee and are not necessarily super well suited for this kind of course. How much do you downgrade them, if at all, given we know how good they are after the driver, but also that they will be losing some distance relative to the guys they're trying to hang with?
Yeah, I mean, any value play this week is going to be, they're going to have shortcomings, and you have to kind of just pick and choose.
At 95. No shortcomings there.
Sure.
We're back on it. We're back, baby.
Sure. Wyndham Clark, we know, is one of the best plays of the
Flawless.
week. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, for the other value plays, they're going to have some sort of issues, and I would just caution against like chasing guys with more distance off the tee than someone with a more complete game. Like Denny McCarthy, we'll talk about current form, has some of the best current form in the field, just so basically on the planet. Is he long off the tee? No. But would I rather play someone who's short off the tee and has a complete game otherwise than someone who just nukes it? Yeah. So I want that distance. Reports again that it's not quite as firm yet. According to Michael Kim, his Twitter,
his Twitter is Mike Kim, which is going to throw some like wrenches into the spreadsheet ruiner discussion. So he might be on the rise in that regard.
Well, his handle is Mike_Kim 714, but his like display name is Michael S. Kim.
Right.
So it's just.
So I think we need to have him listed as Mike Kim in the FanDuel salary, Michael Kim FanDuel Sportsbook odds, and Michael S. Kim on Data Golf. Because Zach Johnson popped up as Zach something Johnson on FanDuel Sportsbook this week. Yeah. That came out of nowhere. So we're on Michael Kim's spreadsheet ruiner watch here.
What? He didn't do anything yet. He just has a different Twitter handle.
Just saying, we're on alert.
But point being, I heard this Twitter account shouted out on the No Laying Up podcast, and it looks pretty sick. So shout out to Michael Kim for the info. But basically, his sort of main takeaway is that it's not playing super firm, which again is going to basically give an advantage to the longer hitters for now. So we'll see how that goes. But I mean, just it's a major. Play the best plays and really get cautious of guys who you want to play who have severe limitations in a certain category.
Absolutely. It's tough to hang when you have major red flags when you're playing against Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Speaking of those guys, let's dive into what golfers have done recently in majors. You're going to look at overall form of majors because obviously we can't look at course history because we have none since 2014. So when you dig back into recent majors, who are the golfers who have popped the most when the pressure has been high?
Yeah, we always sort of debate this when it comes to majors, whether we look at recent majors, past history. It's a lot easier for like the Masters when you can look at Augusta, but definitely not looking at 2014 unless it's to sell myself on Ricky Fowler or I guess Rory McIlroy. But you also don't want to put a ton of stock into recent majors in the sense that if you're struggling at all at majors, then I think people really like to write off golfers who don't play well in majors. And there's a few names on this list who a lot of people would say don't play well at majors, but finish well especially for daily fantasy purposes. Doesn't matter if Patrick Cantlay is not really in contention. If he's finishing top 15 consistently, you love that from a FanDuel perspective. But over the past 5 majors, which includes just one Open championship, Scottie Scheffler is gaining over 3 shots per round on the field, according to my measurements. 4 top 10s. I almost said 4 runners up, but he's got 2 of those. I would not be surprised if he had 4 runners up, but and then a 21st place finish at last year's Open. Rory McIlroy is next up at a 2.9, second, 7th missed cut, 3rd, and 5th. And by the way, I have this whole table posted in my helper on numberFire.com. Victor Hovland, though, is playing well at majors, 1 missed cut, but 3 top 10s. His salary is 11.6. I think he's really interesting this week, not in the sense that I think he's the guy. I just think that he's interesting because if he flies under the radar a bit, it's a major. That's the type of name that you want to be in on. Patrick Cantlay, though, fourth on this list at a 2.23. His salary is below 11,000 on FanDuel. Love to see that. Top 15 in 5 straight majors. He's gaining the same amount of strokes per round as Cameron Smith, but Smith has that win, obviously, at last year's Open, has a missed cut in there. Matt Fitzpatrick is at a 2.19. His salary's in the low 10,000 range. Jon Rahm at a 2.13. Ricky Fowler, 2.09. Just 2 majors in that sample for Ricky, just as a heads up. And then my guy, Xander Schauffele, 2.08 strokes gained per round. 6 straight top 20s at majors. Love what he's doing. Aside from the wedge play, I think Xander's intriguing this week, but those are the names above a 2 entering this week.
We'll talk about Scheffler, McIlroy, Rahm in the current form section. So let's talk here about Patrick Cantlay, because I know the perception is that he's not someone who rises at majors. And I think as a result of that, a lot of times you'll see him get a bit glossed over when it comes to roster rates. His betting odds tend to be maybe a bit longer than you would think they would be typically. And I think that's the case this week. And your model agrees because you show him as a betting value 22-1 over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I feel like Cantlay at 10-9 allows me to have a pretty balanced build for daily fantasy this week without sacrificing at least what I perceive to be a lot of win equity, because I think that he can win. That's just my thought process on it. I think that he can do it. I know a lot of those good finishes are backdoor good finishes, but it's still a sample size of 4 rounds is better than a sample size of what you did Thursday, Friday. So I feel like Cantlay at 10-9 is going to be a focal point for me, a core play, because he fits the build that I want. And he's the kind of player I want as well. What's your read on Cantlay this week at 10-9?
I like him. I think he's a good win value. The biggest question mark for me is Cantlay versus Ricky Fowler. Mm-hmm. Fowler's salary of 10.8 is also very appealing. My win simulation model likes Cantlay a lot more. About 4.7% to win, with Fowler at 2.6%. So based on just that, I should much prefer Cantlay, but I like both. And this is the kind of week where if I could play both of those guys as my second and third golfers, that would be really, really sick. I think you have to be open to different types of lineup construction. Usually we advocate a level of balance when it comes to majors, but those are 2 low salaries, lower than they probably should be. Mm-hmm. But that's only because somebody has to be lower than they should be, unless they just make multiple golfers like the same salary.
Yeah.
So I want to take advantage of that. I'm kind of leaning more toward Ricky from a daily fantasy standpoint. That could be silly.
Yeah.
Especially when you factor in popularity, but I like both.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Cantlay?
I like Cantlay more than Ricky, but it's not by a wide margin. I think they're very much in the same tier. And you also can get both, even with one of the big 3 in there. I'm just going to call the big 3 McIlroy, Scheffler, and Rahm. Even if you put Rory in there, who is the highest salary, it's 8,700 left for 3 golfers to finish it up, and you can do that this week. So I would at least tinker around with that kind of build. And that's part of why I want to be in this range, because it does give you a lot of flexibility. Obviously, it'd be fun to get, Rory and Rahm or Rory and Scheffler in there, which you can do. I'm not opposed to. But I think that having 3 guys with salaries of, let's say, like 10-1 or higher. I mean, 10-1 or higher, I think I definitely want to have.
Yeah.
But like if I can get up to 10-5 or higher, 10-8, that's pretty intriguing, and probably it is a bit counter to our typical, you want balance, but this is also another route to balance, having 3 guys with massive win equity, which is kind of what we're talking about when we're discussing balance in other situations.
Yeah, over the past 5 optimal lineups at Open Championships, basically the top salaried golfer has been around 11.6, second golfer around 11,000, and then third golfer right around that 10-1, 10-2 range that you talked about. So I think that's really appealing. And just as sort of I don't talk as much about optimal lineups as I used to, but at majors, you tend to have less wasted salary, which basically says more of the golfers expected to play well are gonna play well, and fewer values are really gonna pop. And you tend to see just fewer FanDuel points at a major, so it's more about finishing position than it is about birdies. So that's kind of another thing to keep in mind. So finishing position is going to be a little more tied into how well golfers play, which is why you want to, prioritize the better golfers who are like a top 15 from a Patrick Cantlay. Might not come with a whole lot of birdies, but you're not really getting value plays who are just making tons of birdies and then just sort of bogeying their way down the leaderboard. So I think that the 10-1 shout is nice for sure for this week.
One other guy I want to touch on before we move on to talk about current form is Denny McCarthy. And we could have discussed him in the current form section, but McCarthy actually is on the leaderboard that you have here for guys who have done well in majors. 1.85 strokes gained per round in majors per data golf across the past 5. He's played in just 3 of those, but finishes a 7th, 29th, and 20th, which I think is interesting because we don't think of McCarthy as being the kind of guy who hangs at majors because he's not going to gain a lot of strokes off the tee. But the putting is phenomenal. The approach play has been a lot better than it had been previously of late, and it's allowed him to put up some really good finishes. McCarthy's salary is $8,900. Is he someone you're actively targeting this week, Brandon?
Yeah, I think he's a really appealing play. And his strength we know is the putter, which, you don't really want to bank on golfers who are reliant on their putter, but his putting is so well established, so long term. Like his long term baseline is really, really good. He's a 98th percentile putter from within 15 feet on the PGA Tour this season. You love that. Just playing good enough golf with everything else. The way that I think he really trickles down and struggles is if the distance just tends to be too much, too relentless for him. But that's still a really good salary, and that's all factored in when it comes to McCarthy. And his distance, distance is really tricky to kind of discuss because the way that distance is measured can be either just 2 drives, basically, and that's a little misleading. If you look at rankings, he's 110th over the past 50 rounds in distance gain, but he's losing under 4.5 yards per drive to the world average golfer, according to Data Golf in that sample. So, is he one of the longer hitters in the field? No. Is he losing 40 yards on every drive? Also no. So I think McCarthy is a great value play this week.
I agree. I like Keegan Bradley a tiny bit more, but I think both those guys are really fun. Keegan Bradley's salary is $8,800, McCarthy $89. I think both those guys grade out well, and both guys I am very willing to use for this week. Let's have the stud discussion right now and talk about current form. As you look at golfers, Brandon, who have been golfing well most recently, who enters the Open Championship with the best current form?
Yeah, so the way that we do this is look at Data Golf's true strokes gain query over the past 3 months, and if you do that, you see one name out above the rest. That's Scottie Scheffler at a 3.07 true strokes gain per round, so that adjusts for field strength. And he's doing that while losing strokes putting on average. It's pretty ridiculous. He is finishing just top 3, he's basically top 5 every single week. So his recent finish is T3, T4, third, T3, T2, T5. And he's not really putting well. His best putting performance was at the PGA Championship with 0.41 strokes gained per round on the greens, which is fine, but nothing crazy. His underlying putting stats are just okay. So it's not screaming regression, but his tee to green game is phenomenal. He is a better tee to green player by at least 1 shot per round than anyone else in the field, excluding the Live Tour players who are on the leaderboard there because their sample is really small, but it's disgusting. Scottie Scheffler, very deserving to be your anchor play if you want him to be, but he's out ahead of Rory McIlroy on the leaderboard. Rory's at a 2.71 over the past 3 months. Still very, very good numbers for him. Obviously, coming off of a win. Surprisingly, I tweeted a couple weeks ago about putting regression for him. The putter has been very steady. You like to see that. He's got a ton of top tens as well. So I don't think you can go wrong between those two. Probably don't need to spend a whole lot more time on those two right now because there are some other interesting names on this list. And, we talk about data golf all the time, but it's a very helpful tool, especially for things like majors, opposite field events, that kind of stuff, because, they track and sort of do their best to adjust for the difference of fields. And the next names on the list are Cam Smith and Brooks Koepka. They're in the 2.4 range. That's a really strong output. Yes, there are like volume concerns because of the total number of rounds. They have 8 events in there. They're not all 72 holes, but very good golf, all things considered. Following them up are Tyrrell Hatton, Ricky Fowler, Tommy Fleetwood, and Xander Schauffele in the 2.2 to 2.3 range, so not very far behind them. And then just shouting out our guy, Patrick Cantlay, 2.11, Jon Rahm, the forgotten man, 2.06, and then, heat check hero, Wyndham Clark, 2.02. Obviously, his salary of $9,500 stands out in that sense. But a lot of golfers above a 2, and you get one who's very low salaried, but a lot of different ways you can go at the top of the board is really what this is saying.
So we have Rory and we have Scheffler. Rory coming off a win at the Genesis Scottish Open. Scheffler not having a finish worse than T5 since April 16th. When you look at those two guys for cash games specifically, Brandon, which one do you prefer this week?
Scottie.
By how much?
Enough where in a cash game I don't have to make the decision. Mm-hmm. Plus his salary's lower, which doesn't hurt. Mm-hmm. But his tee to green game is so consistent, and I'd rather bank on that. I mean, like Rory's gonna just demolish the ball off the tee, and I talked about the putting should be trending up. I kind of like the putter more for Rory than I do for Scottie. A lot of people, and this is something that I just tweeted a thread because getting annoyed of people calling like Rory a bad putter. He's a good putter. He's a fine putter. He's like an above average putter long term. So it's a little bit close, but for me, I'm going Scheffler because the tee to green game is just so good right now.
And I feel like that discussion even gets slanted more towards Scheffler for tournaments because Rory coming off of a Scottish Open championship and playing in, what he probably would deem the most important major to him this weekend, that's going to generate a lot of interest in Rory. Rory also has the highest salary. Your research has shown that correlates to having the highest roster rate, and betting out's not super different. If you look at some books, they're actually the same at 7-1. FanDuel does favor Scheffler by a tiny amount, plus 650. McIlroy 7-1. I feel like if you like Scheffler more for cash games, and we can probably assume that McIlroy will carry a bit more heat with regards to roster rate, that should push us towards Scheffler in tournaments as well. My question for you is, where is Jon Rahm in this discussion? Is Rahm in the same tier as them? Or is he a half tier down, full tier down? How much does the form for Rahm push him down for you?
Yes, I mean, ranks are always tricky when it comes to golf because there can be a lot of separation. But to simplify it, over the past 3 months, Scheffler's number 1, Rory's number 2, and Rahm is 10th in true strokes gained. That feels like a cavern, and it really isn't. I just want to kind of shout that out. And over the past 50 rounds, which is a pretty predictive sample without getting too far in the past where things can change a ton, Scheffler's at a 2.98, and then Jon Rahm is second at a 2.54. Like, Rory's golfing really well right now. Scheffler's been golfing really well for a long time. Rahm was golfing a bit better than he is now. And it's basically just we're kind of buying at the peak with Rory and maybe be able to buy a little bit low for Rahm. So I have no issues pivoting to Jon Rahm in a tournament, especially if you maybe build a lineup you like that has Rory and or Scheffler. I don't really know what that's going to look like, and then you just kind of duplicate it and swap that out and hope if Rahm wins and you hit the rest of the core, like I think you can feel pretty good about doing that because Rahm's not that far off, and you're going to get a lot of leverage by playing Jon Rahm instead of Rory or Scottie.
Very much so. If you look at fan share tags right now, Jon Rahm is outside
15th.
the top 10. Yeah, 15th versus obviously Rory and Scottie second and third, respectively. So there's a big gap there. And on the heat check, if you are a new listener, our like creed for daily fantasy in tournaments is be different without being dumb. And I don't think there are many better examples of that than using Jon Rahm in like a single entry tournament for this week, because multi-entry, people will get to Rahm because it's Jon Rahm. For single entry, the FOMO of, oh, I can't miss out on Scottie or I can't miss out on Rory will be a bit higher. So I would say if I feel firm about Scottie in cash games, I feel more firm that Jon Rahm is the best play for single entry tournaments for this week. I think that he is, entering the US Open, Rory McIlroy was that guy because it was all about Scheffler, all about Rahm. Rory is starting to pick things back up then. That paid off pretty well. I think that guy is Rahm this week. So to me, in a single entry tournament, I think that Jon Rahm might be the best play in the entire field, all things considered.
Is Brooks Koepka in that conversation for you?
No, because I think that Brooks will get enough attention because it's Brooks in a major. His fan share tags are higher, not a lot higher, honestly, if you look at the actual like tags. But I think if people are not going to get to Scheffler or McIlroy, I don't think Rahm would be the next guy up. I think it'd probably be Koepka, instead.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say Koepka will be more popular than Rahm, but I just want to make sure that we're not going through forever and not talking about Brooks.
Sure.
So I just wanted to flag that. And again, how I'm going to conclude the show is so many of these guys are in play. Like we have our preferences, we have our like approach that leads us to certain names, but so many of these guys are in play. I'm not going to talk about Victor Hovland. You might, I don't know. Great form. He's played pretty well at Opens. The putter is a lot better than I think people realize. Cam Smith's in good form. Like I'll talk about Xander a little bit, but I think that's kind of the Xander and up. Honestly, can't go wrong with any of those names. I think where you get into the being a little too cute, and this is not like this will sound more negative than I mean it to be, but like Morikawa's got some issues and some length concerns potentially this week. His putting is not very well supported by the underlying data. I love Spieth, but I think that's kind of where you're getting into that, just trying to be too different without maybe having it make a ton of sense, unless you're seeing something in those two guys specifically or some other names in that range where you see the case. But I think that's kind of from Xander and up, I wouldn't argue with it. I wouldn't waste a single breath telling someone not to play any of those guys.
Exactly. I think that, as always, trust your own research. You can listen to us, obviously. That's why we're here. But trust your own research, too, if they lead you to a certain path. A couple of value plays with really good form right now. Wyndham Clark, we talked about, $9,500. We probably don't need to sell people on the U.S. Open champion, but a couple guys right below him. We talked about Danny McCarthy. Next up are Bryson DeChambeau and Taylor Gooch. DeChambeau is a guy I have a lot of interest in. $9,400. I could see myself being in that range enough where it's enticing, where I could get to both Wyndham and DeChambeau. I think that would make a lot of sense. Gooch, the off the tee stats are always kind of scary, but the thing with him is he, in the past, has been a guy who has been great fairway through green. Looking at the live data for him, has a couple wins. He had a tie for a win in Singapore.
I think he won in a playoff.
Okay, well, that's weird. Anyway, he missed the cut of the PGA Championship, 34th at the Masters. So it doesn't have the same major results as Patrick Reed, Brooks Koepka, other guys in the Live Tour, but has popped. So I feel good about Bryson. I'm okay saying that. Do you have any thoughts on DeChambeau or Gooch?
I think Bryson fits, especially if you're building lineups that are more distance centric. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to argue there. I like Taylor Gooch this week. He's someone that I targeted a ton on the PGA Tour, but 3 Live Tour wins since April, was T34 at the Masters. Again, I wish there was more because we're so stat centric. I wish there was more that I could point to.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, golf scores are golf scores, and unless he's just literally making 1,000, 50-foot putts, he's probably golfing pretty well.
Right.
But yeah, I think those two names are both in play for this week. And then just shouting out kind of some other names with notable form. Russell Henley, his salary is 9,000. Your boy Keegan Bradley, 8,800. I like him this week, but I don't know if he's going to be like anything close to a core play for me. But Keegan definitely deserves some attention. And then just a shout out to Emiliano Grillo at 7,300. Brian Harmon, who's kind of my boy at majors, 8,000, and Adam Schenk, also kind of one of my low key guys at 8,100. Pretty good form relative to the salary.
Okay, let's dig in now to what the bookmakers are saying over at FanDuel Sportsbook for this week's event. As mentioned, the favorite here is Scottie Scheffler checking in at plus 650. Slight edge for him over Rory McIlroy, who is now lengthened to plus 750. So some enticing odds there. Then there's a drop off down to Jon Rahm at 12-1. Cameron Smith lengthened to 20. Brooks Koepka still at 18-1 right now. Patrick Cantlay checking in at 22-1. There are three golfers currently at 25-1. Those guys: Ricky Fowler, Victor Hovland, Xander Schauffele, with Tyrrell Hatton, Tommy Fleetwood both at 28-1. You mentioned Colin Morikawa. He is 30-1, joined there by Jordan Spieth. And then Dustin Johnson rounds at the top group. He is 33-1. Now, we talked about the big three earlier on. Let's talk about the rest. What are you trying to do after that? Are you trying to jam in two of the big three? Do you want to get in Scheffler plus someone in the Victor Hovland range with his salary being around 11.6? Or are we skewing towards balance, peppering that Cantlay Fowler range in order to take advantage of the salary savings we get on those guys?
Yeah, so I want to get to Scheffler primarily, and then from there, I'm looking at Xander. That start alone has me at 9,150. But Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Ricky Fowler, basically want to get two of those three in there. I don't mind the 10,000 range overall, but I don't love it.
Yeah.
I think Tyrrell Hatton deserves like a nod. Justin Rose right at 10,000, but and this is one of like the downfalls of saying things like this, but with Wyndham Clark under salaried, like he could easily be in the 10,000 range.
Correct.
If I just say, well, I'm going to be able to play Wyndham Clark, I got to make sure I can pivot from that if I'm building multiple lineups. But with Wyndham Clark there, I kind of feel like it's I don't want to say a free square for like a head to head, or
it is,
but it makes it a lot easier to prioritize the upper 10,000 range.
Correct.
And make sure I can get into the Ricky Cantlay, have one of those guys be my third golfer.
Mm-hmm.
It's doable. It does kind of take you down into the low 8,000 range for two golfers, which I don't think is the hardest thing to do.
Right.
But you're still getting a lot of win equity by having four true studs in your lineup if you go that route.
With the fourth stud being Wyndham Clark.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Dude's a major winner.
I know.
And
thank you for acknowledging
two designated. I think he's got 2 designated event wins.
Mm-hmm. He's a boss. I agree with you. What you were saying though, where typically we want that next golfer to be in the 10,000 range, but because Clark kind of gets you that production, we're getting the same thought process and the same build, but just taking advantage of a lower salary. And I think that same thought process applies to Cantlay as well and Fowler at 10.8. So to me, that's why I wanted it down there. Now that does mean I'll probably wind up being a bit lighter on Brooks Koepka, Victor Hovland, Cameron Smith, Xander Schauffele, all guys in that range. And that's scary because any of those guys could realistically win. I'm pretty sure I bet Xander like 5 minutes before we started recording. I'm pretty sure I bet Xander at 25. So like, I think those guys can win. What?
You're pretty sure you did?
I was looking at it. I don't remember if I actually did it.
Okay. It just sounded like too tight of a turnaround to forgotten. But I guess if you went,
I had the app open. I was having trouble logging in. We were talking before. And so I couldn't like actually get in. And I was like really annoyed during covering the spread. I don't know if you could tell I was peeved. There's an app that's very slow, and it was bothering me a lot. No names mentioned, but like, it was bothering me. So I can't remember if I actually got there, but I'm pretty sure I did. So like, I think those guys can win. I just think the better approach for DFS is to skip over them to that next tier and take advantage of the lower salaries on Cantlay and Fowler specifically.
How many what percentage of your lineups would you not have? I'm going to throw Brooks in there. I know you're like lower on him a little bit, but
sure.
Brooks, Rahm, Scheffler, or Rory.
I will not have a single lineup without McIlroy, Scheffler, or Rahm.
Okay.
Like I see no reason. I could see getting to Brooks as my second golfer, and probably should, because like Brooks's win odds in a major are probably pretty high. So good to get the win equity. But I will not have a lineup without one of those three, guaranteed. I don't see the point.
Yeah.
Same for you or no?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay. I think that's the right way to play things, just because they have so much win equity. Like, I know we don't use the F word here, floor, but like their floor is amazing as well. So you kind of can't ignore that. So again, optimal build for us is going to be getting into that high 10,000 range when we can. Which golfers' odds have shifted most notably since Monday? There were a couple that shifted after we started recording, so you don't have to focus on those. Those two were McIlroy to 750, and then Cameron Smith lengthened from 18 to 20. Who else has lengthened since Monday? Or sorry, shortened. My bad.
Okay, now I'm all
sorry
thrown off. I could have repulled everything if I had known, but
no, that's too much work.
Sure is. I had Brooks at 22 to 18. Colin Morikawa 33 to 30. Both Dustin Johnson and Jordan Spieth 35 to 33. Your guy Bryson DeChambeau,
please don't do that.
65 to
Ian
55.
Poulter was far enough. I can't do Bryson as well.
Yeah, I actually just as a side note, I have I bought a Puma golf hat like 6 years ago that I saw Ricky Fowler wearing and I liked it. And I also wear like Puma golf shoes because they fit my wider feet. And now that Bryson switched from his like cap to like a golf hat, I wonder, like, I just wonder if people were like, oh, he must like Bryson because he kind of
brutal. I'm sorry for your loss.
And I'm in the weight room a lot, so like I just hope nobody ever looks at me like, oh, this guy just likes golf because he likes Bryson. So
you're in the weight room, you're wearing the Puma hat.
Not in the weight room, but just the way that we're built is a little similarly at this point. But yeah, just I always worry about that. But I'm gonna say he's your boy. Too. So
no, please don't. It's very rude. I can't understand why you'd be so rude to me. I think it makes sense he's shortened though.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
I think it makes sense that this guy shortened as well. Hideki Matsuyama from 100 to 70. I like Hideki. Laid out the case for him on covering the spread earlier. I might pivot one of my picks to Hideki, honestly, just as a heads up.
I was going to ask you about Hideki for DFS because this is betting. But for DFS, he's 98.
Mm-hmm.
I could see being in that range at times, especially if we're not going to put Wyndham in 100% of lines, just like 96 instead. I need the 4% to go somewhere. I feel like Hideki is a prime consideration for that pivot at 98. I also do think that like I don't like Cameron Young as much as I like Hideki, but I think I would at least put him in that consideration set as well.
I probably wouldn't get there with Young personally, but
I think in like a distance stack, if I go DeChambeau, Rory, Wyndham, that kind of thing.
Well, the other thing too, though, is if you're open to like the Scottie Brooks kind of start, you could go Hideki as your third golfer and still play Wyndham Clark.
Yeah.
Then you're in like the low 8,000 range for an average. I think that's a fine way if you're going to go really top heavy. So Hideki fits a lot of these guys in like that upper 9s, low 10s fit a lot of different builds depending on how you view them. But yeah, Hideki, really good ball striking as expected, really weak putting as expected, but better putting splits from within 15 feet than you probably would realize. So like that, and he's finishing pretty well at majors despite really bad putting. So I'm fine with that. Corey Connors also shortened from 100 to 75. Patrick Reed and Adam Scott from 90 to 80. And Jason Day from 110 to 90.
We've been on Jason Day a lot this year. I will not be there this week, despite the shortening. The form is rough. So we'll not be getting there personally. Any noteworthy lengthenings for you or not as much?
Not a ton. I mean, there's a little bit of shifting. I guess you could throw in Rory now from he was plus 650 at one point.
He was 7-1. He's now plus 750.
Okay. I thought he got to
he might have
plus 6. Yeah, I have him at plus 650.
So he was at some point. He was 7 yesterday and then now 750.
Yeah. So you could throw him in there. I think that's just noteworthy. But Shane Lowry 35-40 and Matt Fitzpatrick 40-50. Other than that, probably nothing to talk about really.
Okay, and which lower salary golfers have betting odds that stand out to you?
Best FanDuel Sportsbook win odds from golfers with FanDuel salaries of 9,000 or lower belong to Patrick Reed, right at 9,000. His win odds are 80-1. Robert McIntyre and Taylor Gooch, both $8,900 salaries on FanDuel, 90-1 each. Our guys, Keegan Bradley, Brian Harmon, 110-1 difference there, with Keegan at 8,800 on FanDuel and Brian Harmon at 8,000. Really appealing salary there. Danny McCarthy, Russell Henley, Siwoo Kim, and Louis Westhuizen all 120-1 at basically 89 or 9,000, with Siwoo Kim being at 86.
Brian Harmon's salary, as you mentioned, $8,000. That can go a long way to making a very top-heavy approach work. Looking at his recent major history, so far this year, 43rd at the U.S. Open, cut at the PGA Championship and the Masters, but was 6th at the Open Championship last year and made 3 out of 4 cuts in majors last year. Form entering is obviously pretty good. Will not have the distance, and that is definitely a downside. But do you think there is enough in Harmon to consider him as kind of a way to retip the scales if you go top heavy?
Yeah, like him more for tournaments in the hopes that he puts something together than for a cash game, simply due to the fact that it's sort of against him to play really well here. Yeah. Not that he can't or not that he won't. But he's golfing really well. A lot of that's with the putter, but he's a great putter and just sort of in control of his game right now based on the current form. So I like Harmon. Probably going to be tempting to make a lineup work in like our head-to-head.
Yeah.
But I want to probably get to someone with a little more distance when it comes to a single lineup from like a head-to-head standpoint.
I'd agree with that too. Also, FanDuel just put 3 balls up, so I know what I'm doing after we get done recording is checking into 3 balls. We're back, baby. We are back. Let's take a look at the weather for this weekend. And unlike last weekend, I don't feel like we need to care too much about stacking tee times because the wind pattern is pretty similar each of the first 2 rounds. Slightly higher winds Friday across the board, but no real need to wave stack there. The best chance of rain is Friday morning, but they should be okay. Winds are around 15 miles per hour, high, but not crazy. That also impacts the expected score you need to win. I think it'll probably be pretty low once again based on this forecast because it's not overly concerning, at least to me. Saturday should feature light rain with wind speeds peaking at around 15 miles per hour, slightly less wind Sunday with more rain. So I think we should play things pretty straight up. Don't think the course would be too terrible as far as the wind conditions. So lucky for you, Brandon, a good week to play things straight up and ignore the wave stacks. Although the wave stack did beat you in our head-to-head last week. Let's go now to our player picks here for the Open Championship. Starting the upper range, Brandon, in the stud tier, who are you building around on FanDuel for this week?
I'm going Scottie Scheffler. I'm not going to overthink it. Best tee to green golfer on the planet, best ball striker on the planet right now. Only downside is the putter, which we sort of know. And I'll be frank, he's a 15th percentile putter from within 15 feet on tour this season. Don't love that, but even with those types of putting stats, he's just top 5 everywhere. Doesn't really play poor golf because the ball striking's there. And so, sure, maybe the ball striking goes away and the putter can't save him if you want to kind of frame it that way. But we know that the most predictable stats are strokes gained off the tee. And then iron play is about the same as putting, frankly, but a little bit more of a lean toward approach play. So with the amount of strokes he can gain with the irons and the pretty much baked in advantage he has off the tee, I don't really see a reason to go away from it, even though Rory's a bit tempting. If I'm going just one of them, I'm going Scheffler.
For cash games, I agree. I would go Scheffler there. For tournaments, single entry specifically, I want Jon Rahm. Again, our philosophy here for tournaments is be different without being dumb, and it is not going to be dumb to roster Jon Rahm at a reduced roster rate. Rahm, it's not that long ago that he was golfing like a robot. He has good distance, phenomenal irons to work at this kind of course. He's had some time off. Hopefully that's helped him reset whatever was bugging him before, where he had that slight downtick, still finished 10th at the US Open. So wasn't like he was totally off. His salary is 12,000, so it's high, but I think that's fair, given it's Jon Rahm. So I think that I want to have exposure to benefit if he wins. I'd say for like multi-entry, I would say my breakdown, if I'm going 100% across all three, I would want Scottie in 45, Rory in 35, Rahm in 20. Maybe I should change that. That's kind of weird. I don't know. I'll think on it. I want to make sure I have enough Rahm to benefit if he wins, is what I would say. For multi-entry, it's a lot easier for me to think in terms of single entry. So I think Rahm's a great play there. Any final thoughts for you on the big three?
Love them. I'd be fine putting Brooks in there,
sure.
At the bottom of that tier.
Yeah, I'm fine including him with them is what I would do there. Who else do you like in the upper range for this week?
I'm going to go Ricky at 10-8. He's just, playing really good golf. And the one area where I think that that I know he's not as good as the rest of the field as the off the tee play. And that's the one stat that I can live with most for this week. He is fourth in the field in strokes gained approach through putting, which is more or less what I'm looking for this week. Runner up here in 2014, 69th percentile putter from within 15 feet this season, which you love to see.
Yeah, I think that Ricky is, if it weren't for Patrick Cantlay being right there, Ricky would be like a prime focal point for me, which is why Cantlay is the guy I have here as my second high salary play. I understand when people are annoyed with him in majors or just in general, but 10-9, I think, is underselling how good he is. He ranks fourth in data golf's true strokes gained across the past 6 months behind just Rahm, Rory, Scheffler. He did miss the cut last week at the Genesis Scottish Open, but that was primarily due to a bad short game, which is not typical for Patrick Cantlay. He's got good distance. He's got good accuracy. So no matter how the course plays, it should be fine for Cantlay. He's finished top 15 in 5 straight majors, as you discussed before. So I think the idea of both is pretty attractive. I will definitely be, like, when I first go to build tournament lineups, I think that's probably the first build I want to tinker with, having Cantlay and Fowler in there. But if I had to pick one, I pick Cantlay, but it's by a very small margin over Ricky Fowler for this week. Moving down to the mid-range, we both got Wyndham Clark. We talked about it a couple times. What puts you on Wyndham at $9,500 for this week?
Yeah, just a great overall golfer right now. Great form, good putter, good, and like what we saw in the U.S. Open is he has the ability to lag putt and just chip like crazy. So he's gonna have to do some creative things this week. I think that bodes really well for Wyndham Clark. So whether it's distance, irons, putting, some creativity, overall form, recent form, he has it all, and I don't really see a reason, aside from game theory, to move away from Wyndham Clark. And you can still play Wyndham Clark and be different. I don't think he's going to be like that chalky. I think he's just a standout value play.
Yeah, we don't typically see guys in that range wind up being uber chalk. Maybe that's different for a guy who just won the most recent major. His salary is up $200, I think, from where it was. Or no, he was 87, maybe. I don't know, whatever. It's not up a lot from where he was at the U.S. Open. He ranks 11th in data golf's true strokes gained the past 6 months, but he is 27th in salary. So I think that he is so for cash games, for our head-to-head specifically, I have to figure out ways to be different, make my lineup different from yours. I will not be doing so via Wyndham Clark. He is kind of like just the free square for a head-to-head for this week. Who else do you like in the mid-range for the Open Championship?
Wyndham was 88 for the U.S. Open.
Okay, perfect.
I had Justin Rose, but I'm going to pivot that last second to... I still like Rose, just fine. But I'm going to pivot to Hideki. He's been top 32 at all 3 majors, lost strokes and putting in all of them. His ball striking is pretty phenomenal. There have been 19 measured majors for him in his career. With ShotLink data, he's gained from approach in 17 of those. The worst he's done is lost 0.15 strokes per round with the irons. We know that's basically the Hideki story, is great tee to green, letting himself down on the greens, but 43rd percentile putter from within 15 feet this year. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I like Hideki a lot too if I wind up in that range, because I think that he just checks a lot of boxes. 98 is a very fair salary, so I'll be there on Hideki as well. My second mid-salary play is Bryson DeChambeau. Finishes in majors of 4th, 20th the past 2 majors. He didn't miss a cut at the Masters, so that matters as well. But since the U.S. Open, so since the most recent major, Bryson has finished 2nd and 11th in the 2 live events, for whatever that's worth. Distance has been typical Bryson, even with the physical change he's undergone. His approach game, very good in the 2 events where we have data on him outside of the Masters. $94 very low for a guy who I think has his upside. And again, if distance does wind up mattering, Bryson would be a guy who'd benefit from that. So I like DeChambeau a lot at 94. I like the idea of having him with Wyndham, but if I had to pivot off Wyndham, I think that Hideki and Bryson DeChambeau, the first 2 guys I would think to pivot away from him, just to reduce the roster rate and make sure it's not 100%. But again, just 96 for Wyndham Clark. Value plays. We both have the top value play being the same as well. We both have Patrick Reed at $9,000. What puts you on Patrick Reed?
I did not realize you had Reed there.
Well, you put them on the sheet before I did, so that's why.
That makes sense.
So I was the one who copied you, but I think that he's the right option here.
Wow. All right.
I'm not a Patrick Reed guy. No, you can't put that one on me, but I did wind up there.
Well, I'm going to talk about your boy Patrick Reed here. He's largely shown up at this year's majors: T4 at the Masters, T18 at the PGA, T56 at the US Open. It's tough. We don't have stats for the Live Tour. We can only do our best, but T2, T5 at the past 2 events since the US Open. It's basically just knowing long-term what Reed can do, looking at the finishes, looking at the majors. Again, I hate talking. Well, I hate talking Live from a analytical standpoint, because there's just no numbers, and I feel like it's just a hot take to sort of say that this golfer is playing well or I like him, but it really is all we can do is sort of impute how someone's playing. And I don't think that Patrick Reed is hitting the ball 500 yards all of a sudden. He's probably just playing Patrick Reed golf, which is pretty good, and that salary, I think we should be open to it.
Yeah, same here. Again, you mentioned the major finishes 4th, 18th, and 56th. It was aided by putting for sure, so that does matter for those events specifically, but he also is a good putter, so it's not like that's coming out of nowhere. 5th and 2nd in the 2 live events since the US Open, so I think that $9,000 for a guy with his ability to do what he did at the Masters, pretty enticing. So I think that Reed is an option with a blend of good meeting expectation, but also very good upside for his salary. Your second value pick is a guy we both like, Denny McCarthy, 89. What led you to McCarthy this week?
Yeah, talked about the putting splits. 98th percentile putter from within 15 feet on the season. Pretty solid form, just stats, tee to green, otherwise doesn't really lag anywhere. He's not great at anything, and he's a great putter. So if he just plays that kind of golf, he should be able to play pretty well relative to the salary. So I'm just not going to overthink it. And honestly, putting's so hard to sort of predict whenever you get someone who's just week in, week out, reliable, and is not a complete red flag everywhere else. Those are the types of golfers that I was historically too low on, including McCarthy, but McCarthy's also playing a lot better golf in the other areas now. So he's on
without
my radar
losing the putting.
Sure.
He's gained that stuff without losing the key strength. And I think that's enticing. You mentioned the major history. A lot of that spans back, he was only in 3 of those 5 majors, but one of those before his formerly picked up and finished 7th there. So I think that's pretty enticing too with McCarthy, and I do like him. I also like Keegan Bradley. He's my second player pick here in the low salaried range. he had a pretty long, bad stretch in majors, but seems like he's fully over that right now. Since the start of last year, Keegan has made 4 out of 6 cuts, which is not perfect, but 3 top 30 finishes in majors. He has enough distance to hang. He's actually a bit above average in that regard. His distance has been trending up a bit recently. We know the approach game for Keegan is very good. He's having plus weeks with the putter, which is weird and kind of enticing, but it's also been a decently large sample now of him being fine as a putter. It might not stick, but the sample on it is growing. So Keegan at 88 makes a lot of sense. Brandon, I want to ask you, when you look at the guys, let's go beyond Keegan. Let's go 8,000, low 8,000 range and lower. When you're looking for guys down there, if you want to like tip the scale, we talked about Harman before. You mentioned Adam Schenk. I think Schenk's my favorite of the guys, in the low 8,000s or the 7,000 range who can really make things a lot easier. Do you have a favorite preferred option down there if you want to really make it a lot easier to jam in studs?
Probably Harman. I'd say Harman and then Schenk.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably those two primarily.
Yeah.
Without getting overexposed. Also, just a shout to Keegan Bradley, 94th percentile putter from within 15 feet. So,
what?
Hard to fake that.
That's bananas.
Yeah, PGA Tour. They don't have a page within 15 feet, but they have 5 to 15, and it's like always hard to find from a Google search. It doesn't take you there, but I was trying to pull that up to sort of confirm, which is for anyone listening, probably the best stat you could look at is like putting from 5 to 15 feet if you're just using the PGA Tour site and looking at like long-term sort of putting. But
Keegan Bradley putting God?
Sure.
Let's go with it. Okay. So I like Schenk most of that lower range. You like Harman most, but I think in general we're receptive to those guys. If you find someone you like down there, in order to get back to the mid range, make getting back there a bit easier.
No, the stats aren't loading at all, but that's sick.
Good. Love to see it. Win picks here for the Open Championship. Once again, the disclaimer we gave last week is that I am way behind in this, need to make up ground. So I'll be launching darts and seeing what happens because I need to in order to win this contest. This does not mean they're recommendations from a betting perspective over at FanDuel Sportsbook. If you do decide to bet them, please do so responsibly at very low stakes because you're probably going to lose that bet. Please keep that in mind when you do so. Okay, disclaimer aside, Brandon, God dang it, Hideki shortened again. Who are your win picks for this week?
I already penciled in Jon Rahm and Xander Schauffele for me.
Rahm?
Yeah.
Didn't expect that.
Why?
I thought you'd go like Cantlay or something.
Well, I mean, I think Cantlay is a good value, but I think Rahm is just a tick off of value. Again, I have him at plus 1350.
I like that you picked Rahm. I think that's a good pick. I just was surprised.
Yeah, I'm going Rahm at 12 and Xander at 25.
Okay. So you have Rahm and Xander. I need long shots. Hideki was 100, then he was 70, then he was 65. He's now 60. Very rude.
Just as a reminder, you can give like recommendations that you do think are good values, and then you can put.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Well, Xander's the one I've actually bet without a boost, so I guess it'd be Xander at 25. Would be the way I go there. Oh boy. Wyndham Clark at 50. We're running it back. Wyndham Clark 50 to 1. Just again, the field adjusted numbers for Clark, I think, are better than most of the golfers in the 50 to 1 range. So we'll go with him.
Mm-hmm.
Wyndham Clark 50 to 1. And then I do still feel like Hideki is very much worth considering at 60. But I also think that Bryson DeChambeau is at 60. So I'm going to go Bryson at 60 over Hideki. When I was between Wyndham Clark and Mito F. and Pereira for the U.S. Open, I picked Mito instead of Wyndham. I'd be in the lead if I'd picked Wyndham, but I'm a moron. I did bet him, didn't pick him. So this guarantees Hideki wins. Congratulations, Hideki, on your 2023 winning the 151st Open Championship. But I will go with Bryson DeChambeau and Wyndham Clark as my win picks for the show. If I were actually giving betting recommendations, I'd go Xander at 25 because I think 25 is weird for someone as good as him for as long as he's been that good.
People think that he can't win. I hear people talk about like when trying to bet majors that this guy doesn't even want a major. It's like if that's a must for you, I don't.
Neither had Wyndham Clark before the U.S. Open, and look what happened. So
I mean, that means that no one's ever going to win a major for the first time again, which seems a little silly. But
eventually, we'll run out of major winners.
No.
The T1, like Taylor Gooch, on the Live Tour. No. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop for today?
I think we covered pretty much everything. I would probably say the range that we glossed over the most was the transition from the low 10s to the upper 9s. So guys like Max Homa, Justin Thomas, Tony Finau, Dustin Johnson, Matt Fitzpatrick. I think they're like viable. I don't think they're like scratch offs, but they're really not where I'm looking to a sort of attack lineup building. So just kind of wanted to float out that I am aware that we didn't talk about really any of those names, but I think it's for a reason for me.
Yeah, I think that with the builds we want, there's advantages being a bit above them, a bit below them. That's the reason we didn't get there. But, if your research leads you to Tony Finau, I'm not going to talk you out of that. Finau makes a lot of sense as always. That is all that we have here for today on the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. As a reminder, please make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. We are here every week talking PGA DFS, leading into that week's event on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. If you want some betting thoughts on the Open Championship, we discussed this over on Covering the Spread with Brandon, breaking down what his model was saying as far as bets for this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can find that on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, the FanDuel YouTube page, and over on FanDuel TV Plus. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter occasionally at Gdula13, GDULA13.
Tweeting out all your Rory McIlroy threads, but not on Threads. Interesting.
I spent like a lot of time on compiling that. I think it got like 1 like, and then it turned out that he just started putting really well.
Magic.
So
magic.
If I just tweet like a stupid joke, probably gets more traction.
So can you tweet a good thread about Wyndham Clark for me to make him start putting? I mean, I guess he's already putting well, but can you help me out here?
It's not how it works.
Okay.
It's more about the math.
The request is still in. Math can say what I want it to say. I'm on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. Want to thank you all for tuning in. Good luck with your lineups for the Open Championship. Enjoy the golf. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.